Welcome to day 5 of the destruction of Hurricane Ian in Northport, Florida. If you have not yet, go and check out the last video I had posted talking about and showing you what the devastation looked like specifically in the Northport, Florida area just day 1 after Hurricane Ian made landfall. To update you guys, Hurricane Ian made landfall in Southwest Florida on September 28th, 2022 as a Cat 4 hurricane with 150 plus mile-an-hour winds. And in Northport, it caused a lot of devastation. Northport was not the center of Hurricane Ian. Fort Myers, Cape Coral area was. However, Northport, Florida still felt its effects. And as you can see here from this video, there is a lot of flooding going on, and it continues to this day with the flooding happening in Northport, Florida. And there's been a lot of changes happening between day 1 after Hurricane Ian and now day 5 of Hurricane Ian and what the devastation looks like. In fact, there has been a lot of rising waters, including the Big Slough region of Northport that has overflowed, and that has caused flooding over I-75, the Interstate 75, and that actually caused that highway to shut down for about a day in both directions due to the flooding, and they needed a structural engineer to come and check out the bridge. And also the Coco Plum has overflowed, and that has caused massive flooding throughout the entire area. In fact, flooding a lot of areas in Northport that you would not think would have flooded. So here's the big question for everyone. Is FEMA now going to recreate the flood maps in Northport to now accommodate this 500-year flood? Because historically speaking, most areas would not have flooded. If this was, if this was a different storm and FEMA maps, this storm should not have caused this amount of flooding. However, this is historic high flooding in the Florida and specifically in the Northport area. Now, FEMA is going to have to recreate these maps to now accommodate these new flood zones. People here once did not think that they needed flood insurance with Flood Zone X because they were in a Flood Zone X. However, a lot of people now have flooding in their houses. They aren't covered by flood insurance because they were in a Flood Zone X. FEMA didn't say that there was going to be any flooding during the 500-year floods. There was not even a chance of flooding here in the Northport area in some of these areas. Now a lot of people are left questioning, was the FEMA map really accurate? And that is the big question to this day, is what is FEMA going to do next to move forward in order to help these people, people that didn't have flood insurance because they were in a Flood Zone X and now their house is flooded out. And one of the biggest areas affected by the flooding, in fact, was the Northport Estate area. So that's north of Interstate 75. And right now, that area is still underwater in about 4 to 5 feet of water. So a lot of these people have been rescued or have been evacuated out of the area. There have been a couple of residents that have stayed in that area. However, authorities have told people to stay out of that area, and they're not allowed to bring supplies to these neighbors, bring supplies to these residents because of how dangerous it is to go there with the high rising floodwaters. So that's raising a lot of other questions. Are people still going to live in the Northport Estate area after seeing this historic flooding? And just talking from local residents, they're looking to actually leave the Northport Estates area because their house was not expected to flood. However, it did end up flooding. So once again, we're going back to the FEMA maps. How accurate really were they, and what liability will FEMA have? And as you can see here from this video, a lot of people were saved, a lot of houses were saved. However, there was a lot of flooding in the streets, which that's how it was engineered, was that the streets would flood so that the houses did not flood, and the houses were built up a little higher. So some of this is actually how it was supposed to happen. However, for a lot of these houses that, once again, were in a Flood Zone X, they didn't need flood insurance, flooded. Now, there is something wrong right there with the FEMA map. And now I get that this was a 500-year flood. However, a lot of these areas, like you're seeing here, partially were in a Flood Zone X. However, as you can see, houses are flooded in here as well. So once again, no flood insurance for these people, and it's leaving them questioning, what do they do next? What insurance money are they going to get to salvage out of their house? And now to talk about the new construction. As you can see here, actually some of the houses withheld the hurricane winds. However, the one directly below in this video, you will see that the block has been knocked down just because there was no trusses, there was no bracing. So you will see that frequently in the Northport area. Any new construction house that had block, there was about a 50-50 shot that, that house would be completely knocked down just because of the winds and there was no extra bracing. However, a lot of these new construction houses actually stood up fairly well. I actually went to go visit a couple from our investors and went to go visit nearby builders' houses in new construction. The worst thing that really happened to them was a few shingles blew off, but other than that, they actually stayed pretty structurally sound. We didn't get as high of winds as south into Fort Myers. However, a lot of these houses did get roofs ripped off and also had damages to their sidewalls. And also, as you can see here, is that we also have East Price Boulevard flooding from this creek right here. And this is not, a rare sight to see in Northport. A lot of roads have been shut down due to the flooding coming over from these creeks over these bridges. They've had structural engineers come here and check out these bridges to make sure that they're safe to drive over. And also, there has been a lot of road cave-ins, right? So a lot of water that's rushing around the roads, and they're caving them in, making them impassable for cars to come through. But as you can see here, we're back into another part of Northport to where all these streets were in a flood zone AE, so they're expected to flood, right? And a lot of these houses were saved because they were built up a little bit higher, so this is, this would not be a rare sight to see in Northport. In fact, a lot of people wish that they had this issue, while others, as you can see across from this, actually had flooding into their houses from the roadways. So that is, once again, another major issue that is going to be brought up is what is there to do next? And one of the biggest questions I'm getting asked right now is what is going to happen in the near future? What's going to happen in the next 2 weeks, 2 months, 5 months, 10 months, year from now? What is going to happen to the Northport real estate market? And to be honest, we're not really sure what's going to happen because we've never gone through a storm of this magnitude before. So are people going to cut their losses, basically take their insurance money, pay off their mortgage, and then sell the house for really cheap? Is this going to be a good time for investors to come in, scoop up on these houses that, need a lot of fixing upping, and then, turn around and sell it? What is going to happen? We don't really know, just because this hurricane is so new. No one has ever dealt with a hurricane of this magnitude before, in an area that was not really expecting this size of a hurricane to be, impact this local area. So we're not really sure what's going to happen in the real estate market, but we're going to be watching this very closely over the coming weeks to see how people are going to be affected moving forward, both residents, both buyers, and also investors. And maybe this will be a great time for investors to come in and scoop up on some properties that people are looking to let go for cheap and just move on to the area. Because like I mentioned before in this video, a lot of people will be moving out of this area just because, their house wasn't expected to flood. However, it did flood. So it's going to make a lot of people rethink, how they're going to be building their houses and elevating them a little bit more. Even though it says it's not in a flood zone, just elevate it a couple more feet to ensure that this house will not flood. And one final note before we finish up this video is that if you are a resident in the Northport area and you have gone through this hurricane, I would love to talk with you to see what your experience was living in one of these houses and kind of your feedback and what your next best moves are. Or if you have a second house here in the Northport area and now you're wondering what to do next, I would love to talk with you to get your feedback on what your thoughts are about these houses in the Northport area, and then eventually start talking about the next steps and how we can move forward as a city, as a community, and start rebuilding Northport to be better than ever before.